meet your new best friend. You're gonna find a book you'll love to pieces. The girl behind the counter recommends dollar books and shelves of graphic novels. Titles old and new, you'll find them all. With action figures, board games, toys, and models to add to your new Comic Wednesday haul. The comic book store, the comic book store. 'Cause that's where the books live, but it's also much more. It's the heart of the art form that we all adore. Your friendly neighborhood comic book store.
Good evening, everybody. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight we're doing Comic Stripped. This is where we review a graphic novel that had a direct adaptation into a television series or movie. And on the docket for tonight is the graphic novel Ciudad, which was developed by Anthony and Joe Russo of Avengers fame, but it was actually written by Ande Parks. And it was adapted into a feature-length motion picture that debuted on Netflix on April 24th, starring Chris Hemsworth, called Extraction. Yeah, it was the most watched movie on Netflix the weekend that it debuted, and I don't know how many people actually knew that it was based on a graphic novel. So, how about that? That said, my guest tonight to discuss all this with me is Alexis Hejna from Honeysuckle Rose Creations. How do you do, madam?
Hey, doing good. I have to admit, it's interesting because the graphic novel for this, when I went to look up information for the movie, the graphic novel does not actually have a Wikipedia page and doesn't have a lot of sources discussing it. So it's pretty easy, I would say, for people to not realize, alone from the name change, and quite a few plot differences for a lot of people not to realize, oh yeah, these things are related.
Yeah, the graphic novel is named after the city in which it takes place. Just to kind of give you a brief overview, Ciudad came out in 2014, started in October of 2014, and it took place over 5 issues. And Ciudad is this city that it's like bordered by 3 different countries. It's like a major trading post. It's also like a big crime and gang haven. And so the whole plot of Ciudad is that this one rival gangster family has kidnapped the daughter of their rival gangster family, and a mercenary is hired to go in and get her, and the whole thing revolves around the fact that this is one hell of a city to get the hell out of. And the movie changes the location from this really interesting town, and that's why I brought this up. That's kind of a good place to start, actually. The thing about this town, like I said, is that it's a major trading post. It's got all, it's bordered on 3 different sides. There's, roads and whatnot leading out into these various countries. It's a very busy place, but it also makes it very hard to get out of. And the movie changes the location from, Ciudad, which is kind of a character in the graphic novel in and of itself, this city, to Bangladesh. And I didn't get that same feeling that I got from the graphic novel. It's one of my major points of contrast and criticism between the book and the movie, because there's great things about the movie, don't get me wrong. But I really feel like that one decision, it kind of loses something, because I don't know what about Bangladesh, other than that's where they wanted to shoot and then they ended up with a bunch of Indian actors, would make you want to tell this particular story there. You know what I mean?
Well, you know who else didn't really get into it? The people of Bangladesh. There was a lot of complaints with how they framed the city. How's it pronounced? Dhaka,
I think.
Dhaka. Folks, like many times before, we're going to apologize in advance. Mark and I both good pronouncing things. So if we're not trying to be, insulting or anything, we're just idiots.
I'm going to go with Dhaka.
Okay, Dhaka. Yeah, Dhaka's a real town, and it is nowhere near as dirty, crime-infested as the movie makes it. There was a lot of complaining from Bangladesh. especially since this film didn't even shoot in Bangladesh. Part of it was shot in Thailand for a lot of the outdoor stuff, and the rest was shot in India.
Oh, it's interesting.
I thought this was interesting. You may not know this, but India has a very, very strict gun control in the country. You cannot bring guns in. And they wouldn't even allow the production staff to bring in guns that would fire dummies, blanks. Almost all of the guns we see in this movie are rubber. No moving parts whatsoever. And all of the shots and everything were added in post-production.
Wow. Well, boy, the visual editor then and the person who worked on adding the gunfire to this deserves some sort of award, because I didn't notice a problem with it. It didn't look added in post to me, and they did a hell of a job. And boy, is there a lot of it.
Yeah, we're going to talk, when we get to talking about the movie more, we're going to talk about the visual style, because while the plot of both the graphic novel and the movie is pretty predictable, I would say, it's very cliche-ridden. The style of the movie itself is absolutely gorgeous, and the first-time director, what's his name, Sam Hargrave, really showed he's got some great chops. It's not totally cut and polished, but this is a director I would really like to see more out of in the future. He clearly knows what he's doing.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the book here. So I'm on Comic Vine, and I'm just going to read these so people know what kind of happens in the book, and we'll kick it around and just discuss it as a story. I don't want to do it issue by issue. We'll just do the whole thing at once. So, issue number 1 starts with, she was kidnapped and taken to the worst place on Earth. He was hired to get her out. Now they're both trapped in a city that wants them both dead, and their hopes of getting out are fading fast. From the bloodthirsty criminals to the corrupt police to the kid hiding a Glock underneath his sweatshirt on the corner, everyone wants Tyler Rake and Eva Roche dead. Set in the real-world locale of Ciudad del Este, Ciudad explodes with breathtaking action and hyper-violence from the critically acclaimed writer Ande Parks, writer-directors Joe and Anthony Russo, and artist Fernando Leon Gonzalez. So that's a description of issue 1. Basically, issue 1 is the setup. We meet Tyler Rake. When we meet him, he's trying to get proof of life to see, make sure the girl's still alive. And then once all that's done, he ends up rescuing her from the clutches of this gangster, and they are on the move, and that's pretty much all of issue 1. It's just the setup. Issue number 2. Mercenary Tyler Rake and daughter of drug kingpin Eva Roche are trapped in Ciudad del Este. Momentarily safe, Tyler heads to complete the job and deliver Eva to her father and his cartel, but the noose tightens around them as forces on both sides of the law are set to stop Tyler from getting to the finish line. So, this one of the gangster families has control over the police, and they are in hot pursuit, forcing Tyler to constantly having to call his handlers and say, "Hey," and this is why the movie will end up becoming called Extraction, because the whole thing is about the original plan to get out of this city has gone to pieces. And he has to keep calling his handlers to try to figure out how the hell they're going to get out of this city. And his handlers have to keep negotiating things. And it's just really tense back and forth while they're under gunfire from an army of city police officers and gangsters and whatnot. Issue number 3. Double-crossed and hunted by Roche and Edu, Tyler and Eva attempt to outrun their assassins in a storm of gunfire. Meanwhile, Mora pressures the mayor of the Ciudad to shut the city down and use the corrupt police force to find Tyler and Eva before they find a way out. Hopefully through Tyler's last friend in Ciudad, Gassan. So issue number 4 is probably my favorite issue. This is where they go to Gassan's house, and he leads him to believe he's got a family there, and they think they're safe for now, and they're trying to figure out what the next move is going to be. And I think, if I remember correctly, Gassan sends his family away and ends up trying to sell them out, which ends in a fight between Gassan and Tyler ends up killing him. if I remember correctly.
Killing him. Tyler is nearly killed by him. And, Ava is the one who.
That's right. Ava kills him.
One who kills him. You actually get I'll just admit, it's actually kind of a terrifying bit where we have a point of view of Tyler as he's being, I'm guessing, choked to death, and his eyes are getting blurry, and it's getting darker, and it's legit, unsettling.
And then finally, our conclusion issue here. With Edu dead, Tyler and Rake's chances for escape from Ciudad have improved, but not by much. Now the full force of Mora's influence comes to bear, with every criminal, dirty cop, and opportunistic would-be thug out for blood. A final violent showdown at the border looms in the distance. All right, so let's talk about this. Right from the beginning, what I like about this story is the character of Eva. We get into a little bit of her history. Shortly after meeting Tyler, Tyler gives her pills, and then later on, I think when they're at Gassan's house, she starts to bleed, and that's when he admits to her, oh, one of the things I gave you was like a morning after pill. And she's like, what the hell? And you get this whole point of view from her of, you are treating me the way my father treats me, which is the way the world seems to see me, which is I am just an object to be bargained with, used as a bargaining chip, traded around. I am an object to be set on a shelf and admired. I don't feel like anyone treats me like a person. Certainly you're not. My father definitely didn't. I don't understand why the world frames me the way that it does. To the point where, in the midst of this rescue, she almost wishes she were dead. She was like, oh, they might as well have just shot me. I don't know what the point of all this is. And I kind of... It softens up Tyler, at least in part. He ends up becoming close with her, because for the first part of this story, he's like, oh, it's just a job, it's just a job, it's just a job. And then I think this is where he starts to see her as she wishes to be seen, which is as a person, at which point it isn't about even completing the job and getting the money, which he isn't going to get. It's about treating her as a person and making sure she's safe, which is what she deserves. I like that element of the story. What did you think?
Absolutely. I mean, he says he's not going to... his handler keeps saying, dump her, you're not getting paid. It turns out that her father basically had never intended on paying anything. He just wanted Tyler and his crew to do the dirty work. And then he, sending his men to get him, and not actually pay anything.
Right.
He was going all Piper on them. And Tyler keeps saying originally, he's like, and they keep saying, you need to dump her. The job has gone tits up. We're not getting any money. And she's got a giant target on his back. And Tyler actually says, first, he says, if I dump her, my career is shot to shit.
Right.
He's like, I do not want people to know that when things got hard, I gave up on my targets.
Yeah, I dumped my cargo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's like, I'm not pulling the Han Solo here.
Right. And I think that's realistic. I think, when dealing with mercenaries and ne'er-do-wells, a lot of your ability to get work is based on reputation and your ability to complete the mission, because none of these are going to be easy. Mm-hmm. I mean, not that I've ever been a mercenary or anything. I've never even been in the army. But I would imagine that none of these jobs are particularly easy, or at the very least, varying degrees of difficult. And if you want to be successful, you have to be able to embrace those difficulties and persevere. And so I think that's a very realistic portrayal of him of, okay, it's hard, so what? They're all hard. I can't just throw her on the side of the road. Who'd want to hire me after that? I'll be known as the guy who threw the target girl on the side of the road, and when the going got tough, I took off. So, how does that help anybody?
I also feel that they did a pretty good job of keeping Ava from getting too cliche. Again, this story has been done a million times before. It is unbelievably cliche, but they managed to keep Ava a little bit more of just the object, the prize, the MacGuffin girl, not to mention the sex object. Yes, she is gorgeous, obviously, and we do see them kiss, and he obviously starts to develop feelings for her. But I have a sinking suspicion that if they had just, let it go completely 100% cliche, then by the time they got to where they think they're safe, she would be throwing herself at him.
Yeah. Very kind of romancing the stone. They get closer as the adventure continues.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever seen Romancing the Stone or not. I might be dating myself there.
I have not, but I know about it. So
okay. One of the things I also liked about this story was the idea of you have the elder gangster dad who's in prison, and he's trying to keep things under control, and he's losing his grip on the city. And this move to steal his daughter was this other guy trying to be an upstart and take over his territory. And which goes back to what I was saying about Eva, where she's like, I'm not a person, I'm a pawn between these two trying to take over the city. And that's bullshit. But I liked the interplay between the two gangster families, and the need to. There's a lot of, as a theme of this book, there's a lot of need to project strength. So the father who's in prison, he can't afford to have his daughter out of pocket. He needs to project strength, or he's going to lose everything. Not the least of which is any kind of means he had to keep himself alive in prison.
Then, of course, you also have the rival, who our opening scene with him, has his bodyguard Chuck. In the movie, it's a kid. I couldn't tell from the artwork how old this person was, but he basically says somebody is stealing from me, and I want to know who it is. And he just has his bodyguard start chucking people over the side of the building until somebody frickin' fesses up.
Oh, that's a great scene, by the way. So yeah, he's like, somebody is stealing from me. Who is it? And they just took a random kid and threw him off the roof. Then they go to grab the next kid, and he's like, the person stealing from you is the one you just chucked off the roof. And the gangster's like, nice. Well done.
But then he says, I still want someone to get punished. Chop off 2 of your fingers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think Ande Parks does a really good job of writing, interesting but shitty characters in this book.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Even Ava and Tyler, like I said, they develop pretty well, and you are rooting for them, but they are not what you would call role models. Mm. I will say the artwork kind of was a little hard to get into. This entire book is not just black and white; it's all line art. So there's very little shading. Mm-hmm. It's either white or it's black, and it's gorgeous line work. It's very clean. It's very crisp, but it starts off right from the get-go. We do a little time jumping around, which I'm not going to lie, did kind of annoy me because I could be wrong, but I don't think there were any markers on the page saying, it's like 3 days ago. Present time or anything like that. I think we had more of, this was translated from Portuguese, this was translated from Spanish.
Yeah, there was a ton of that. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, they wanted to make sure you knew that these people were actually speaking another language, and they're just translating it for our sake.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was looking at, it's like right in the early pages when Tyler's taking out the guards that have Ava in the closet, and there's a lot of blood splatter, but frankly, I cannot tell for the life of me who is doing what, who's got the blood, who is in the front, who's in the back. It reminded me a lot of the artwork in Sin City, but Sin City went out of its way to give characters a lot more distinguished style. So you could see them have a better idea of like who was being hurt and stuff like that. These characters are drawn much more realistically. Again, it's beautiful, beautiful line work. But I feel that they probably could have done a little bit more with cleaning it up so you have a better understanding of what's going on, or at least let us get to know the characters before you're rushed into the blood splatter and everything. Because I will say, by the time you get to issue 2, you've got a better understanding of who is who, what's going on, and you can see things a little bit more clearly because you've gotten used to looking at these characters. 3 pages of looking at Tyler's face, I can't, right from the get-go, I can't tell him from the terrorists.
Yeah. As far as the artwork goes, I don't mind simple artwork. As you said, these are very crisp line drawings. I thought it was mostly readable in that sense. I didn't get too confused as to what was going on where. I mean, also, it was a fairly simple story. the last thing I want to talk about with this book, and then we can move on to the movie, is the conclusion, which is, they fight their way out of the city. He ends up getting her to freedom, and he'll send her money later on. And in this iteration of the story, 6 months later, he goes back to Ciudad and blows the rival gangster's head off. As just a means, matter of all the trouble you caused me 6 months ago, and all the blood and treasure that I shed. He wanted to make sure that he got his revenge for it, and I was like, oh, that's a fun way to end the book. What did you think of the conclusion?
Not only that, but I felt that he was doing this to make absolutely 100% certain that no one came after Ava. We find out that she has left her home in San Paulo, I think is where they said. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm sorry, I don't have the book open in front of me, so I can't keep turning back and forth on the pages. But she does leave her home. I feel that the million was because he knew that she was essentially she wasn't going to be her father's pawn anymore. But by doing that, she has no access to any money anymore. I feel he's sent her the million as a fresh start, and he went back and killed the guy to make absolutely sure she was safe.
Yeah. So overall, what'd you think of the book?
Again, little cliche, but still enjoyable. It is. I would say it's a pretty good book.
All right. So let's talk about the movie now. The movie basically follows the same beats as the book. It's from just a purely structural point of view. It's kind of beat by beat adaptation. What changes is somewhat the portrayal of Tyler Rake. The target changes from a Portuguese girl to Brazilian girl to a Indian high school boy.
14.
Yeah. Instead of Ciudad, it takes place in Bangladesh, like we were talking about before. But outside of, and then at the end, which we'll talk about briefly, the person who ends up getting revenge is not the lead, which was an interesting choice. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and read the plot here. After a day at school, Ovi Mahajan, son of an incarcerated Indian drug lord, sneaks out of his house to visit a club where he is kidnapped by police officers working for rival drug lord Amir Asif. Saju Rav, a former para operator and Ovi's protector, visits Ovi's father in prison. Unwilling to pay the ransom as it will hurt his prestige, Ovi Mahajan Sr. orders Saju to retrieve his son, threatening Saju's own family. Tyler Rake, a black market mercenary and former SASR operator, is recruited by fellow mercenary Nick Khan to rescue Ovi from Dhaka, Bangladesh. Rake and Khan's team prepare to extract Ovi, with his father's men set to pay them once Ovi is recovered. Rake rescues Ovi, kills his captors, and takes him to the extraction point, but his father's men intentionally fail to transfer the funds. Instead, Saju kills Rake's teammates and tries to kill Rake so he can rescue Ovi himself. Learning of Ovi's escape, Asif orders the head of the local police, Colonel Rashid, to initiate an immediate lockdown of Dhaka, securing all bridges and travel points out of the city. Khan arranges for a helicopter to extract Rake outside the city and tells him to abandon Ovi since the contract has been nullified. He refuses, haunted by memories of his own son, who died at a young age from lymphoma when he left to serve in Afghanistan. After escaping, Saju and the corrupt police and tactical units on Asif's payroll, Rake fights off a gang of boys led by Fahad, a young criminal eager to impress Asif. That's the kid who says that's the kid who nearly cuts his two fingers off, like we were talking about before. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, it's a scene where freaking Chris Hemsworth beats the crap out of a bunch of 12-year-olds. It's hilarious. I love it because he goes downstairs like, I just got my ass kicked by the Goonies from hell. That was a great line.
It was funny. Rake calls his friend Gaspar, a retired squad mate living in Dhaka, and he and Ovi lay low at Gaspar's home for the evening. Gaspar reveals Asif has placed a $10 million bounty on Ovi, which he offers to share if Rake allows him to kill Ovi. Rake refuses and fight Gaspar, who gains the upper hand but is fatally shot by Ovi with his own gun. Rake calls Saju and asks for his help, forcing them to team up to escape Dhaka. Rake draws attention away from a disguised Saju and Ovi as the two make their way through a bridge checkpoint. Then follows to cover their escape. Khan and her remaining mercenaries approach from the opposite side of the bridge, and Asif watches from afar with his binoculars. In the ensuing firefight, Saju is sniped by Rashid, who is in turn sniped by Khan. Wounded, Rake instructs Ovi to run to Khan's waiting helicopter. As a badly wounded Rake follows, he is shot in the neck by Farhad, and seeing Ovi is safe, falls into the river. Ovi, Khan, and the extraction team escape to Mumbai after and safety. 8 months later, Khan kills Asif in the men's room, like you do. Ovi jumps into his school swimming pool to practice holding his breath and surfaces to see a man watching him. Okay, so the star of this movie, besides Chris Hemsworth, the also pretty Chris Hemsworth, he's a pretty man, as my wife would say. The star of this movie are the hand-to-hand action combat stunts. Holy cow. And you talked about, like, this is the guy that I think that worked on the Marvel movies.
Yes, the director he's originally a stuntman. He was Chris Evans' stunt double for the early Captain America films. He is now the go-to fight choreographer for the entire MCU. I mean, that's one hell of an honor.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have to say, the best parts of this movie were and I'm not, like, I remember notoriously being kind of bored with John Wick and complaining, like, I can't do with 2 hours of just kung fu fighting. But much like Frank Grillo and Boss Level, it wasn't just Chris Hemsworth punching his way through 2 hours of this movie. I actually thought the fight sequences were extremely well done, very artistic looking for fight scenes, very dynamic. We get an 11.5-minute sequence that is stitched together to look like it is entirely one shot. Mm-hmm. And you know me, there's a reason Rope is my favorite Alfred Hitchcock film. I love it. Have you ever seen 1917?
Can successfully do that.
Have you ever seen 1917?
No, I haven't. Oh, well, I've seen parts of it. Andre saw part of it, Andre watched it. I did not get a chance to sit down and watch the whole thing with him. But yeah, I remember watching part of it and being blown away by that. That was really impressive. Yeah,
I mean, you know, Robert Winfrey and Andrew Graham reviewed it when it came out. I wasn't able to be on that review. I was doing other stuff, but I did see. Yeah, plug. I did see it in the theaters, and the gimmick with that one was the movie is mostly one take. There are a couple of tightly edited shots, but you don't notice it as the audience member. The whole thing seems like it's one long take, which is an impressive feat, to be sure.
Absolutely. We get this the car chase alone sequence of that, I think, is one of the best ever put to film. The way they're actually able to move from the back seat to through the windshield, looking so seamless. From what I read on IMDb, there was actually part of the sequence where the director essentially was on the hood of one of the cars. He was like just kind of strapped in and holding the camera so he could get the shots.
That's impressive. I mean, and it shows. I think it heightens the quality of your action movie. Look, especially us here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, we do mostly action movies of some degree or another, whether it be superheroes or straight action or kung fu or whatever. And you really have to take like great pains to try to make your action sequences stand out from the bevy of competitors out there. I mean, you can throw a dart and hit an action movie, but it really takes some doing to make it stand out. And I think that is if I had any reason to recommend Extraction, and I had to narrow it down to just one, I would tell you watch it for the action sequences. They're phenomenal.
Absolutely. Again, this is a director that we really want to see more of in the future. This is not a cut and polish perfect film. even the changes they made, I mean, it kind of made me laugh because I was reading some of the reviews and they were talking about how this is, again, a very cliche story. And part of me was like, oh boy, just don't read the book. It's worse.
I mean, there are only so many stories in the Naked City. It's all in how you tell them. And so, moving away from the really crisp action sequences, which Chris Hemsworth, let me start there. Of all the Chris's, Chris Hemsworth, I think, does a phenomenal job with action movies. I mean, of course, we know him from the Thor movies and whatnot, and he's had goofy roles here and there. He's been in Ghostbusters as a goofy character. He was in the Men in Black, the Men in Black movie with the woman that plays Valkyrie. And Tessa Thompson, yeah. And, I mean, he was fine in that. He certainly has charm for days. But here, more so than as Thor or any of the other roles I've seen him in, is where I saw his action chops come out. Like, this was a very physical role that he had to play. And he absolutely knocks it out of the park. But more than that, Tyler Rake, the character, is written, with... I mean, we talked about the Tyler Rake in the book, of him being motivated by my word and ability to finish a job is my bond and how I get paid, and it's important. And so, and that evolves into I have feelings for this girl and I don't want to treat her like an object. Here, he gets close with the kid. He realizes that the kid is a person. We don't necessarily get a lot of what you get in the book. He's written a bit softer. He's written a bit more empathetic. Less like it's just a job.
It's Chris Hemsworth. You have to. It's like he's an amazing action star, but you still have to make him just a little bit on the cuddly side.
Yeah, you have to make him likable, which I don't know how much Tyler Rake in the book is likable per se. I feel like they did a good job of making him likable in this movie. He is just drowning in regret and sorrow, which you find out is because his son died. And I think he wears all that well. I mean, for as goofy as Chris Hemsworth tends to be in a lot of the roles that he picks, I thought he did a good job here of portraying, of really hitting the dramatic points of the character.
I also have to admit, I like how they wrote the story of the son's death. Again, you could tell from some of the early flashbacks that was the way they were going to go. You could see when he's, sort of daydreaming and stuff, and they mention, you need to dump the kid, the job is kaput. You see brief images of a little boy playing on the beach, and you put two and two together. Mm. But I'm so convinced they were going to go with the face-off style story where it's like I let my guard down and my son was killed by a rival gang or something. No, the poor kid dies of lymphoma, and Tyler wasn't there because he's a war veteran, and he was on another tour of Afghanistan.
Right.
So, and he talked about how it's like he volunteered because he's a good soldier. He couldn't have known that his son was going to be sick while he was overseas. Right,
and he's now filled with regret because of it. And and I don't mean this in a mean way, but and rightly so. I mean, you don't know, and you make the decision. You try to make the best decision with the information that you have at the time, but it doesn't change the fact that he went away, and while he was away, his son died. And I don't think anybody would want to be in that situation, and I think they would be filled with regret when it happened.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, Hemsworth plays the role really well. I am kind of intrigued to find out why they decided to cast Hemsworth and have him do his native Australian accent. Because in the comic, Rake is an American. They keep saying, it's like, look, it's the American. And part of me just wondered, it's like, did they just decide once they had Chris Hemsworth, it's like, nope, we're just going to let him do his natural Australian. Because Hemsworth can do a decent American accent. I've seen him doing it in smaller films.
I mean, This movie has, to one degree or another, I mean, granted, it's mostly spent in India, but I think letting him just be Australian gives it more of an international flavor. Mm-hmm. It makes it a little bit more exotic, I think, than just, Another American doing American things. I was fine with it, and again, he as you said, like, he hardly ever actually gets to do that. He very rarely gets to be Australian. So
Yeah.
I think they figured,
or he's Thor.
yeah, I guess they figured, like, what the hell? Let's just let him be him, and we'll write that as part of the. I mean, maybe in an early draft of this, he was CIA or Green Beret or something, and they were like, well, we're going to cast Chris Hemsworth. And it's like, oh, isn't he Australian? Okay, he's whatever the Australian version of Green Beret is or whatever. I thought, just one more thing about Chris Hemsworth. I thought him and the kid had good chemistry together. I believed Chris Hemsworth wanted to save this boy. For the boys part, I've never seen him before. I don't know what he's done. And he is played by Rakesh Jaiswal. He doesn't have a Wikipedia page. I don't know.
Try to pronounce that.
Yeah. In any case, I thought he did a good job. I thought he portrayed the right amount of anxiety and fear throughout this without being grating. I talked about that on the Demon Slayer podcast. I can't stand characters that lean into I'm a fraidy cat too much. And granted, it's a shit situation, especially when you're a private school boy. But at some point we got to move past that. And I think he does I think the way he's written, and I think his acting, he did a really good job of coming across as likable and someone you're rooting to get out of this alive. I did not want to see him shot.
I think all the actors do a really good job. I was very impressed with the actor playing Sanju. You get the scene where he calls his wife and his son. He's talking to his son saying, I'll be home before you open your eyes. And he's lying, obviously. And the way he's just holding back tears because he's convinced he's never going to see his son again. And spoilers, he doesn't. I actually looked up, this guy's a big Bollywood actor. And I'm not going to lie, pretty sure the Russos are still on as producers for several upcoming MCU films. It would not surprise me if a couple of the Indian actors we saw in this film are going to get cast in future Marvel films.
What do you think of David Harbour as Gaspar?
I love David Harbour, and I love this is an actor who, no matter what he's doing, seems to have chemistry with everyone, and I love it. He just sounded so natural talking to Hemsworth, and it was great.
Yeah, we haven't seen Black Widow yet, but the parts of him that we've seen in the trailer as Red Guardian, he definitely seems to be like chewing up the scenery and trying to take up as much of the camera as he possibly can. That's not a fat joke. It's just he is bigger than life in those Black Widow trailers, and here it's such a more subdued character. You're reminded that the man has actually good acting chops. He's not just a clown.
Absolutely. It felt like a nice little callback to his role on Stranger Things. I just loved a little bit when he hands Tyler some food and he goes, it's like, my wife made that, so I want you to be careful about what you say about it.
Yeah.
It's just a great little moment.
That whole scene with him and Hemsworth, where he's trying to feel Hemsworth out and maybe push him along the side of, hey, why don't we just kill this kid and collect the money? He's nothing to you. Why, you're screwed out of the money anyway. So why not salvage what you can? It's not totally in terms of tension, but it kind of reminded me of the beginning of Inglourious Basterds with Christoph Waltz.
There's something about the way they acted that gave me the impression that this isn't the first time that they've said we need to ditch our cargo, as it were. You get the feeling that he has previously said, oh yeah, it's like when things go belly up, I've tried to salvage what I can and get money.
Yeah.
He clearly is not saying this as in this is the first time he's done it. You get some ideas that he's like, oh yeah, I've given up my cargo so I can actually get money. Of course. For the love of God, Eddie, I gave you a rawhide so you wouldn't bark. I have one dog that's all bark and one that's all bite. So,
one more character I want to talk about. I want to talk about the the final scene of the movie, the big bridge sequence. The is played by Pranyashu Panuli as Amir Asif, the Bangladeshi crime lord who kidnaps Ovi. I like a good villain. We talk about villains a lot. We used to do a podcast. Robert did. Everyone loves a bad guy. I like a bad guy who projects a lot of menace without being a Disney villain where they're over the top and screaming and throwing things everywhere and just chewing up the scenery. I like that he had a quiet menace to him.
We seen with the kids, the kid getting thrown over the roof, and the other guy saying that the one you were stealing, you just killed, and he still hands the Farad the knife, and he still says, "Cut off your fingers," and he's not saying this in a menacing way. He sounds very calm and collected, like he had just told his assistant, "Go get me a cup of coffee."
Later on, when Farhad comes to him and he's offering to cut off his fingers because they get interrupted for some such thing. And so he's like, all right, you keep your fingers for now. Later on, after Chris Hemsworth beats up him and his buddies, he's like, I'm going to cut off my fingers to show you how dedicated I am to your cause. He's like, why don't you keep your fingers and just go kill the guy? And I'll tell you, there are a few moments in movies that really get to me. I kind of cry at the drop of a hat. Jesus Christ, I cried during Moxie. But at the end. But I mean, really, kind of hurt my heart when I see it. And so, mark the center square on your bingo card, everybody. When Kennard, spoilers, shoots Omar in the back while he's getting cigarettes at the convenience store, that was one of those moments where you're like, it comes out of nowhere, you see who did it, you see who he's doing it to, and you're like, oh, that breaks my heart. That nothing about this scene makes me feel good. And that's kind of the feeling I got with less in personal investment in one of the characters. When Farhad shoots Chris Hemsworth in the back, shoots him in the neck, because it's one of those where you rarely get to see any of the bad guys succeed in the end, or get a proper piece of revenge. Usually the henchmen, they're just cannon fodder. They're there for the good guy to kill or beat up. They're meat to be shot up. And here, you'd think he was a throwaway character, but they do a little bit more with him, then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then in the end he kills Chris Hemsworth. And you're like, oh, ouch. What were your thoughts?
It was interesting. I like a good villain who, again, comes across very suave and sophisticated and powerful, but clearly has no problems getting his hands dirty. Mm-hmm. And you really get that with this guy. I also felt interesting, again, with Sanju, because you're not sure, or Saju? Oh my god, again, the pronunciations, I suck at this. You never really know whose side he's really on. And it's very interesting just kind of watching them go back and forth on that.
Mm-hmm. So I've talked a lot about this movie now. Before we get into the bridge scene, was there anything or any characters or any specific scenes you wanted to talk about?
No. Again, the sequence, the 11.5-minute seamless sequence is absolutely gorgeous. It's so well done. I love it.
Remind me, what happens in that scene?
We have the car chase, and then we have them running through the apartment building, avoiding the police that are being paid by the bad guy. So, I mean, that part alone was just gorgeous, and I loved every second of it. We get the great scene with David Harbour as the turncoat.
So the final act of the movie takes place on this bridge, and it's a very simple thing. Get the kid to the other side of the bridge. Problem is, it's blockaded. Cars are stopped. You've got soldiers everywhere. It's a fairly monumental task to get this kid across the bridge at this point. We've got the rest of Chris Hemsworth mercenary team on the one side, and you've got the gangsters and the cops on the other side, and the kid in the middle. And then Chris Hemsworth, who initially had stayed behind to provide cover, finally catches up, and there's a lot of hand-to-hand combat and gunplay and short-range gunplay on this bridge, until finally Chris Hemsworth takes one in the leg and then eventually is shot in the neck. The kid himself finally makes it across the bridge into safety. He's on the chopper and he's out of there. And then, later on we have the scene where the woman handler ends up killing the bad guy. But I actually thought, in terms of a third act occurring in like basically one location, it's one long action sequence, I thought it was pretty well done. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I do kind of wish they had made it a little bit more clear where Ovi had ended up at the end of it. There was some speculation from some reviews I read where they thought that maybe he had gone out of Bangladesh or India, wherever completely, and he was in a new location so he could get away, again, from his father and from the bad guy. Someone had even suggested that maybe he was now in Australia. So,
Mm-hmm.
and frankly, we see him in the swimming pool, and I thought at first that was just the school swimming pool, but you see people around, it's like, wait, those people don't look Indian. So
That's an interesting pickup, because I thought he was at the school.
So again, it's like, I'm not 100% certain, and I kind of wish they had made that just a little bit more clear. But yeah, the bridge sequence is really amazing. Again, I have respect for the ability to use just one set piece like that and make it work so well.
All right. Do you have anything else you want to talk about with the film? If not, then we'll start to close up.
No, I think we're good. I think we've covered it.
Okay. Well, would you recommend this movie to people who have not? I mean, it was the most watched movie in its weekend on Netflix, like I said before. But in case people haven't seen it yet, you're listening to this podcast because you just happen to like what we do here, and you wanted to see what we thought of this, but you haven't seen it yet. I would recommend it. I think if you're into like the John Wick movies and the Marvel action sequences and whatnot, you like a good shoot 'em up. I think you can't go wrong with Extraction.
Agreed. Now, I understand this kind of film isn't going to be for everyone. It's very violent. It's very bloody. It's very strong. This. I'm not going to lie. This is not a movie that I probably would want to see more than once.
Mm-hmm.
But if your stomach can handle that kind of stuff, if that's your, cup of tea, your brand of vodka, whatever, yeah, check it out. If nothing else, again, as I said before, this director, I want to see more out of. I want to see him given more opportunities in the future.
All right, that'll wrap it up for tonight. Tomorrow, Alexis will be back along with Robert Winfrey. We'll be doing Raya and the Last Dragon. Not Raya, Raya, as I found out. Raya and the Last Dragon. Myself
I thought that was Thursday and tomorrow was SpongeBob.
All the way around.
Okay, good to know because I was going to watch SpongeBob tonight.
Nope, tomorrow is Raya and the Last Dragon. And we actually have money to talk about. Hot damn. And then on Wednesday at noon, we'll be Chris Bailey and I will be reviewing AEW Revolution. Which, if you can't wait for that, but you want to hear me talk about the ridiculous barbed wire exploding death match, my son, my wife, and I did a commentary live commentary while we were watching it. As it was happening, we were talking about it because I think my son's hilarious. This is his reactions to things. And my wife doesn't like the sight of blood, so forcing her to watch a death match brought me great joy. I asked her to cook. She said she was going to cook. Then she bailed. Then I'm like, fine, you have to watch the death match. And she was like, it's better than cooking. She changed her mind when it was over. But the hilarity with the sparklers at the end trying to mimic an explosion was the best thing ever, and we howled at that. So that's up in the archives now. The full review will be up this Wednesday, and then the Metal Hammer of Doom will be in the evening. We'll be watching. We'll be reviewing A Day to Remember. You're welcome. The aforementioned SpongeBob, Sponge on the Run. Will be reviewed Thursday night, just me and Alexis, on a special episode of DMU Hollywood. And then that is it for the week. Yep, just 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shows. Not too bad. Considering I feel like I've done last week. I think I did like a zillion shows. We did the Rough and Ready. We did Tom and Jerry. We did Epica. We did the TNG movies. We did Coming to America. We did Boss Level, and then my kids and I did a commentary for the Tom and Jerry movie, which is also pretty funny, for the 1992 cartoon. So that's all up in the archives. What do you got going on with you?
Well, Honeysuckle Rose Creations, the intersection of geek and chic. Like I mentioned in our last show, we just found out that a couple of conventions we were hoping to go to this year have sadly been sidelined.
Oh, hang on. I'm sorry. In our conversation, I absolutely forgot to do two things. One, and I apologize, I don't like to cut you off when you're doing your thing, but got a quick shout out to Grammarly, one of our sponsors. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, spelling mistakes, while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. So to download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2Mnetwork. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2Mnetwork. And oh, by the way, Alexis, you know what we didn't talk about, which we should have? We should have talked about the music. What did you think of the music in the movie?
It was actually quite good. And yes, we should talk about the music, because if you keep pissing off our sponsors, I'm never going to get paid.
Ugh, don't worry about being paid. It's an honor to do podcasts with me and to have the time to sit here and discuss film. Cinema is an event.
But you know what else is an honor? Keep it by lights on.
Ugh, get a paper out. So the music from the film Extraction was actually done by Henry Jackman and Alex Belcher. The entire soundtrack is available on AmazonMusic.com. So if you go to AmazonMusic.com right now, you can get yourself a free 30 days to check out Amazon Music, and then you can listen to the Extraction soundtrack or the Boss Level soundtrack or the Coming to America soundtrack. Do a lot of soundtracks here on these here podcasts, but there's also all kinds of other stuff that you can listen to. You could listen to Cannibal Hulk. Do you know what Cannibal Hulk is? You don't know what Cannibal Hulk is. Cannibal Hulk is a rap album, and it's fantastic. That's on AmazonMusic.com. Everything you might want to listen to. You could listen to Mandy by Barry Manilow at the Copacabana. Copacabana? Mandy?
Get your bingo cards, folks.
So go ahead and go to getamazonmusic.com/W, the number 2M network. That's getamazonmusic.com, W2M network, to get your free 30 days of Amazon Music on us. Okay, 1,000 pardons. Please continue your plugs.
All right. Well, as I was about to say, we are currently in discussions with OzCon, which, like last year, got put off due to a certain pandemic you may have heard about on the news. I don't know. I think I got mentioned once or twice. But they are looking at doing a virtual con, and they are inviting vendors to advertise with that. So I'm going to be looking at that, seeing if that is something Honeysuckle Rose Creations will be participating in. Keep a lookout on our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We will be announcing if we're going to be doing that or not. As always, our Etsy and Handmade at Amazon shops are open. We're going to get ready here pretty soon to put in a bunch of new merch, because it's that time of the month where I suddenly realize I haven't designed anything in a while, and I'm getting itchy. So we're working on a couple of new designs. And hey, fans of Disney Plus, go ahead and check out our stuff for WandaVision. We have our couples Scrabble tile ribbon chokers for both Wanda and Vision. We have our Captain America and Winter Soldier bobby pins that are currently up on the site. Big news for the upcoming show. And if you're like me and just can't wait for Loki to come out, well, we have got tons of merch for our favorite God of Mischief as well. So go ahead and check it out. Again, our stuff is on Etsy and Handmade at Amazon. And as always, keep abreast on our Facebook, our Twitter, and our Instagram. We will be announcing any shows that we will possibly be doing digitally, whether or not we'll be back on the road, and when all of our new merch will be launching. That's Honeysuckle Rose Creations, where fandom meets fashion at the intersection of geek and chic.
All right, folks, thanks for checking us out on this. We've done a lot of long shows lately, so it's fun to do just kind of a quick one. Get in, get out. So thanks for listening to us. Have a chat about Extraction and Ciudad, the book in which it was based. For Alexis, Hejna, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.